Today Chris and I are going to lead this session on recruiting great lab members, and we're excited to have all of you here with us today. Chris, do you want to go over the agenda?
Sure, thank you, Katya. Hello, everyone. So we're gonna go just have a little introduction for Katya and I, talk about each of our labs, structure and evolution. Of course, like not every lab is the same, and depending on like how you're building your lab, and then how time progresses, right, and opportunities as well. Marketing and recruitment strategy, how to get the word out, and then critical aspect, finding the good talent, how to find great students, wonderful students, and postdocs, and then open it up for discussion, community sharing of resources, and of course, these are just the perspectives of Katya and I and some of us here. So I think the more that you contribute, more we can crowdsource ideas that we can all learn from. So thank you.
So we'll start off with introductions with Chris.
Let me unmute. Sorry. So Chris Olivares here. I'm an assistant professor, in my fifth year in the University of California, Irvine. I'm from Mexico City in Mexico, and I moved to the US for my undergrad. So I did my undergrad in chemical engineering, and stayed there for my PhD. And then after I graduated, I wanted to do some field work. So that led me to a postdoc in South Carolina for a year, working on water quality and fires, getting all the field work experience, and then realizing that working with the threat of maybe alligators eating your samples it's really hard, but it was a very fruitful experience. And then moved to Berkeley, where I was 4 years, also another postdoc, got to get that different kinds of experiences as well, and back to the lab. So I joined at UCI. Funny fact is like April Fools in 2021, so I had to figure out if I actually had a job. But it's been 5 years and ups and downs, still here. And the picture you see on the top is my lab. And I love swimming and painting. So I think we have Katya next.
Great. So I'm also an assistant professor at the University of Washington in Seattle. I'm originally from Andhra Pradesh in South India. I did my undergraduate degree at UC Berkeley in environmental sciences, and I also studied global poverty in practice and energy and resources. And the focus of my work in undergrad was looking at how climate change impacted plant species distribution and abundance, so really ecology and fieldwork focused. And then I pivoted for my PhD, stayed on at Berkeley, but switched to the civil and environmental engineering department. And my doctoral research was focused on modifying and developing an adsorbent media for remediation of geogenically contaminated groundwater that had fluoride contamination, so naturally occurring. And then I transitioned into a postdoc, a commercialization postdoc actually, at the University of Washington, where I had the opportunity to field pilot the defluoridation technology that I designed in three different countries in India, Kenya, and Tanzania. And from there, during COVID, I started a remote postdoc with a lab at Berkeley, where I led the redesign of a passive chlorinator device for mass manufacturing. And really exciting to come out of that work is that now this device is being sold in Nairobi and Kenya. So we achieved our goal that we set out. And then shortly after that, a few years ago, I started as an assistant professor in a different department than my field of expertise, but I've been loving it so far. It's called Human Centered Design and Engineering, HCDE. And I really love being outdoors. I'm a rock climber. I play soccer. I also love doing different types of art, including throwing pottery. And here you can see a few pictures of my lab doing some field work, as well as some lab work and going on some outings. One of the lucky things of being out here in the Pacific Northwest is we can both enjoy the outdoors, but then also be able to study them. So, yeah, that's a bit about me. And now we'll transition into how both of our labs were structured, and in the last few years that we've been faculty, kind of how they grew.
Thank you. So for my lab, so I started in fall 2021, so still was one of the peaks or tails of the pandemic. So pretty much I do a lot of wet lab research and analytical chemistry work as well, but we couldn't set up a lab. But we have data available, and also one of the the first PhD student that I recruited had a very strong interest in machine learning, so I think we could do some projects with that. So that's how we got started. And actually, there was a high school volunteer as well that joined at the same time. And it was a really wonderful way to get started because, again, like with the context of the still the pandemic. Then I got an email from another student who had a background in bioremediation, which is also one of the things that we do in the lab, and it was a really good fit. And then she joined in winter, so kind of an off the regular fall start. And then the lab kept growing the following years, adding one PhD student. Some of these students, one in particular was an undergrad researcher in my lab. So again, it was an undergrad student who had not had hands-on lab experience, again, because of the pandemic. So really being an undergrad researcher in my lab was their first experience with research, and they loved it. Encouraged them to apply to a bunch of programs. In the end, they decided to stay in the PhD here at UCI. So I was excited that they wanted to stay and support the students. So overall, I have mainly PhD students in my lab. I do not have any postdocs. Mainly, I didn't did a dedicated I guess approach to like look for a postdoc. And then we had some master students that come through the program, and they're doing research in a lab on side projects. And but we have had consistently diverse number of undergrad researchers, anywhere from one to two to like about, there was one quarter where we had almost 10 undergrad researchers. That has been also very rewarding. And I pair undergrad researchers with grad students, and then I ask the undergrad students to present also in our labs just to make sure that we're all involved, present in our group meetings so that make sure that we're all involved. Um, I think at this point, it's maybe too many PhD students, especially considering all the stresses that we all are facing, right, with funding and different long-term higher education paradigms. So I'm holding off for recruiting just to make sure that I can continue to support the students that I have. So that's me.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So I actually had a very similar kind of evolution. I started my program, my research group a few years after Chris, but in terms of like scaling up, I followed a similar trajectory. The big difference here is that when I got hired, I didn't immediately come in with a PhD student because prior to me getting the job offer, I didn't participate or have the chance to participate in the grad recruitment process. So my first year, I actually worked primarily with undergraduates. And here it might be shocking to see over 15, but this is because our department has a really cool course structure called directed research groups, which students basically take for independent research units. And I just launched a big research project to study kind of water corrosion and water infrastructure breakdown on the university campus. So it was just a fun way for students to get involved, start collecting data, and for us to learn a bit more. And so that's kind of how I launched my lab with a lot of undergrads doing data collection. Then by that summer, I took on an NSF undergrad student. I had taught a class between the fall and the summer, I think in the winter. And this master's student in that class was really excited about my lab's work and just wanted to find any way to get involved. So by that summer, I had basically hired a part-time master's student that joined. And in addition, this high school prodigy contacted me out of the blue. And I just was like, let me give him a chance. Let me just interview him and see why he's so passionate about joining the lab. And I was just blown away. This student had really stellar computational and data visualization skills and research skills. They had already worked in different labs prior to joining. And so we had a lot of fun doing that work. And then by the fall of my second year, I was able to recruit a PhD student that joined. And I also offered another directed research group. And so we had kind of a lot of things going on in the lab then. And I really focused that year on applying for grants and so on. And then the following summer, again, I really liked the NSF program and the undergrads that were starting to work in lab. And so I decided to recruit a few more. And these are students that are coming from all over the country. So it wasn't necessarily UW undergrads, but over the years since I started mentoring them, I've actually kept in touch with them. I've written them rec letters, and now some of them are almost ready to apply for PhD. So it's really exciting because it's also another way to recruit students that you've already kind of vetted in their undergrad phase that might continue on for grad school. This past fall, I recruited two more PhD students, and now I have three. And we had another MS student that decided to collaborate. This was a different one than the one prior, so we're continuing to recruit from our internal pool of students. And some of these students are taking independent research units like quarter by quarter, and some of them are hired on grants. So it's kind of really variant, the makeup of who's volunteering, who's doing independent research, and who's getting paid. Okay.
Now,
For that.
we can talk. Yeah, we can talk about marketing strategy because it's really important, right? To get the word out that you're starting a lab, or do you have maybe a project that you're intend to recruit students for this project. So how will you attract? Definitely the website to make sure that it's listed, clearly define your lab goals, thinking about maybe a tagline for your lab or what is the vision that you want to build, of course, with your research program, the type of culture also that you're looking for, any details about your projects, the resources that you're, especially if you're doing outreach projects, right, or any other pieces of information that would be helpful for someone that maybe want to learn a little bit more about your research. And also, it's good because when students contact you, you can see basically if they've gone through these documents, right, and if there's something that specifically draws their attention, as opposed to just drawing the keywords that may be associated with your research lab. You can list the team lab openings and expectations as well as part of a lab member. Certainly LinkedIn and in social media, so just sharing the word out there. That LinkedIn is the only thing I have. Also, I would say like it's sometimes, at least for me, overwhelming just to keep track of everything. And don't I just have a LinkedIn, and I'm not constant poster most sporadically, but sometimes it can be helpful, especially if you have parts of your network, right? Supporters and previous advisors or colleagues that can share the word. And then email listserv, like for example, we've seen all of us, right? Like AESP emails sent out by different professors that are recruiting students. So definitely use is a great way of getting the word out. And then also you can ask the department to send a flyer that you're a new professor, right? This is what you do. And because students, especially for example, when I started, like my classes were not listed with their names, so that you have to like encourage that even with current students at your institution, that so they know that you are newly established lab or new direction, just to make sure that that you get again your lab and your research out in the institution, outside of the institution, through all these different medias. There's some ideas, and then if anyone has other suggestions, that again, this is just a perspective that Kari and I have. But if you have other suggestions that we're missing, we'd love to hear about them. And then towards the end of the slide, we have an open discussion. So this is just a sample of my lab. So I used to use WordPress, and then so I never really invested the time to figure out how to use WordPress, and I switched to Google Labs, which is sorry, Google Sites, which it's much more easier. And so this is basically my lab, and then a tagline, what do we do, what are we about? And I have research, a tab for people where students, I encourage them to write their description of what their research is, and also their LinkedIn page, especially thinking about their future after they graduate, when they leave the lab, just so that potential employers or like future opportunities, they have an online presence as well that is defined by them. And then resources, photos, also maybe some, what is the day-to-day in the lab like? Like, are you doing modeling? Are you doing maybe spending time with an analytical instrument? Are you doing field work? Just for those that are interested in joining the lab, getting to know more, know what is the day-to-day of a lab look like. And even though like we're all in environmental engineering, environmental sciences, right, our day-to-day and as a researcher can look very, very different. Any news celebrating graduations or any paper acceptances, awards, that's also helpful just to keep the buzz of your lab.
Um, so I can tell you a little bit about my lab and my kind of advertising strategy. That first year that I got hired over the summer, I actually started working with some undergraduate students in our department. Luckily, I'm in a design and engineering department, so a lot of them had really good design skills, and I myself like to draw and stuff. So we spent quite a bit of time working on a lab logo and brainstorming kind of a lab name. In my department, it's less traditional to have it just be the PI's last name. So I came up with something called SWELL, Safe Water Equity and Longevity Lab. And on our website, we, similar to Chris, do have kind of a high level thing just to get anybody, regardless of what methods they're interested in or what background, just caring about the topics of safe water access, thinking about designing technologies and deploying them, focused on monitoring water quality, so kind of quantifying chemical contaminants, but also improving it, so the treatment technology piece. And then I briefly mentioned a little bit about where we're pulling methods from. So that kind of shows students we care about environmental engineering, we care about design and involving communities and working with doing qualitative research methods to get data. And we also focus a little bit on the public health impacts of the work. Similar to Chris, we also have kind of like a team section. And right now, my website is also on WordPress, but I'm getting a little bit frustrated with the layout and how challenging it has been. And so I'm also in the middle of thinking about moving to Google Sites or finding another template because here you can see with all these background colors and so on, it was part of the extension of the design of the logo. We kind of made a custom template. But I'm starting to think that for ongoing updates, we might also switch to Google Sites just for ease. Then I have some pictures that my students, I, and some other friends had taken of the Seattle area and some of the hikes and stuff. And I do have this as like a small hyperlink that goes to like I forget what we call it, but like explore this area so that people can envision living there and be excited to move for reasons beyond research, because a PhD especially is such a long period of time that I wanted to put some stuff in there about what the city was like and the outdoors. And then we have a few sections. I split up my lab right now into kind of three research areas looking at defining problems where it's really using more of the data science and computing kind of skills. And so we have a little bit of the projects that are going on there, what this research area is, and some of the publications. And then we have a design area where we're really talking about experimental wet lab research, hardware prototyping, getting user feedback by implementing prototypes in field settings, building portable sensors, these sorts of things. So that all fits in there. And in the deploy area, it's more so like how do we actually translate our research so it's actionable and we communicate these scientific findings to our partners? What partners outside of academia are we working with, and what does it mean to actually scale up, commercialize, or deploy solutions? Okay, so the next section we're going to talk about is how to find good talent. So, what are the characteristics and qualifications you should be looking for or you are looking for when building your lab as an assistant professor? And here I put PhD in quotes, or not quotes, in parentheses, because this set of kind of characteristics could be relevant to any student you hire or even any student you take on to just mentor for even a quarter. So these are important factors, but of course, hiring a PhD student or even a postdoc is a much longer term commitment. So that's kind of why we designed these characteristics. So first thing, obviously, upfront, what are the experience and qualifications of this person? What is their current degree focus? What have they learned in undergrad? Or if they did get a graduate degree, what did they learn? And based on your lab's focus, it is kind of important to see, have they had any field experience? What is the type of and quality of lab experience that they've had? Have they gotten used to using different analytical tools or different models? Are they a computational expert? Are they an experimental expert? Are they a little bit of both? Have they done qualitative research? So really think about the skills that you want them to have coming in and which ones you're okay being like, you know what, it's okay they didn't know how to do that, but I can train them, and being part of my lab, they can grow and evolve during grad school. Because you don't want to have too many unrealistic expectations of like, you know, having the perfect candidate because they might not match up in other ways. So beyond experience and qualifications, you actually really want to think about personality traits. So is the student curious? Are they humble? Are they willing to admit when they don't know something or when they make mistakes? Are they independent, self-driven, and self-motivated? How organized are they? Are they going to show up on time? Are they going to take meeting notes? Are they going to be responsive? How creative are they? This one is a little bit more subjective. I don't think the creativity is something you can really figure out in a short interview or, you know, written statements, but over time you can see that if you have kind of like a trial period for a student for a quarter and then deciding whether you're hiring them long term. And then of course, along with that comes reliability. And this last point, are they advisable? So when you give feedback, how are they going to react to that? Are they willing to grow? And related to these personality traits, it fits right into lab culture. So you have to think, how is this person going to fit into the culture that you've already established or what you hope to nurture in the future? Are they more kind of on the competitive side? Are they willing to be collaborative? Are they going to work with and help co-mentor other students in the lab or like, work with them on experiments or field work or whatever it is? I think that's really important because oftentimes in grad school, you're not just learning from your mentor, as all of you know, you're also learning from your peers and others. And just on that piece of lab culture, I've heard so many stories of when just one person joins a lab, it can really make or break it in terms of how people are interacting, the social dynamics, how the environment feels in the lab setting. So that's why we're kind of really stressing these points as factors you should consider when hiring. Even if the person has perfect qualifications, it really could go in either direction based on these other factors. And last but definitely not least, you're thinking about the research interest, right? So, what is the alignment between the student coming in with your overall research program? Are they going to help your lab go into a totally new research direction? Are you ready for that? Or is it something where they can kind of plug into existing grants and existing preliminary work that others have already conducted in a research area that you're really comfortable with? And tied to that, you want to ask yourself the question, are you the right person to advise them based on your shared interests? I've had applicants wanting to join my lab where it just seemed like they were perfect in so many ways. But then I had to tell them, I'm probably not the right person to be your PhD advisor. I'd love to maybe co-advise or work on a project, but for your own benefit and your own growth, you might want to look elsewhere. Okay, so I think for now, that's actually all we have prepared in terms of material. And we have about a half an hour left on this call. So we will leave it up open to discussion. And we also, on this last page, have a few resources. Chris, you want to quickly go over them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were just these are just looking on any universities resources about specifically guidance about recruiting grad students. We both Katya and I do not have postdoc scholars, but these are some links and definitely we have other colleagues and friends here that do have postdocs and that we can ask their advice on that. But basically ones from UC Riverside or from like scientific journals, right? Just so there's other resources for you to keep looking at. And then at the end, just like scientific management as well, like that's a lot of things that personally I think that I don't think that we get many preparation for many of these things, how to recruit, right? How to have a strategy of mentor, but we'll cover that in future workshops like this. But also something to think about, and as well as looking at some of the characteristics that Katia mentioned for recruiting good talent. Especially, it's I think personally about a lot about the people, right? Ultimately, you can always train students in a new technique, but it's really about those making sure that you have that lab culture. So some resources are there for you to take a look take whatever is useful. And if there's others that you know that might be useful to share with the community, please post them on the link. Oh, sorry, in the chat, and we can have them updated in the website. So thank you all, and yeah.